In this video, I'm going to explain to you whether or not you need a comp system for Age of Sigmar. All right, I'm going to start off with a little note here. If you are a tournament player for Age of Sigmar, there will be pretty much nothing in this video that you really need to hear, because if you're a tournament player, you need to do whatever the tournament organizers say. So if they use a specific system or a specific rule set or a specific FAQ or whatever, that's what you need to follow if you want to play in their tournament. That's just clear and simple. So go to their website, download the PDFs, whatever it is you need, and build your army according to that, because none of the rest of this will matter. You just have to follow what the TOs, the tournament organizers, have to say. So this video is pretty much aimed at the newer players, the people who are getting into Age of Sigmar for the first time. I've had plenty of people ask me, since I've started doing videos about Age of Sigmar, they've said, well, what comp system do you use, or what point system do you use? Because they go online and they read about point systems and all the people talking about the different systems and how the game, Age of Sigmar doesn't have a point system and all that kind of stuff. And they think, well, I've got to find the one that I should play with, and then, because otherwise the game is incomplete without. I would say the game is not incomplete without. Now again, this is my opinion, but I would say that you should try and play the game the way it's written. You should try and play with the way that they explain building your army for the game, the army for the evening that you're going to play with or whatever. They explain in the rules that you roll off and then I place my first unit. Don't deploy it. You don't put it on the board where it's going to go. You just put it on the board. That's what we do, at least at our local shop, is you just go, okay, I'm going to take these guys. And then your opponent says, okay, well, I'm going to take these guys. And then you go back to you again and you're like, all right, so he did that and I'm doing this. And so I'm going to put these guys out here. And it becomes a game before the game. For people who've been, veterans who've been playing for a while, you sit down and you write a list, and then you go to an event, maybe it's a local shop or whatever, and you set it down and you're very confident about your list. And then your opponent puts down like the perfect counter to your killer unit or whatever. Like you're like, I can beat anybody with this list as long as they don't do X. And then you sit down and then this person drops X in front of you. And you're like, well, this isn't super helpful. But you can't change it because you wrote it all down and it's on a piece of paper now, so it's etched in paper or whatever. With Age of Sigmar, you're building your army that you're going to be using for that battle kind of in real time. I put down a piece, you put down a piece. I put down a unit, you put down, you go back and forth that way. So then when your opponent puts this down and you're like, that's interesting. Well, I'm going to not use those guys because they'll get steamrolled by it. So instead I'm going to use this. So like I said, it's kind of the beginning of the game before you even start rolling dice, and playing the real game. That's one of the things that I really like about Age of Sigmar. And that's one of the things that I think that you, as a new player, should definitely make sure that you try. Definitely go out there and look at it and play it as it's meant to be played. And if you still are just like, nope, gotta have some points, well, then maybe the rest of this video at least will help you a little bit, and we'll see. So as soon as Age of Sigmar came out, immediately people were like, oh, well, why don't we use wounds as points? And you can do that. There are people that still do that. They'll just be like, we're going to play a 100 wound, list. And then you just bring guys who add up to at least 100 wounds. Some figures are only 1 wound figures, and some model, sometimes they're 2 or 3, or, some of the big guys like the Glotkin is like, I don't know, 15 or 16. I'm not completely sure how many wounds he's got off the top of my head. But when you're playing that way, there are kind of ways you can kind of trick it. There are obviously always little ways you can get around it, but some people will just use wounds as their points for what they're doing. Other people come up with very interesting equations where you take, okay, the number of attacks, and then you take the chance to hit on those attacks, and that becomes one number. And then you take another equation and you look at the defense, which is bravery versus wounds versus save, and blah, blah, blah. And that comes up with a thing. And then there's something else, and then the rending, and it's like serious hardcore mathematics, and then you get a number. And then that means the goat people are 12 or whatever. You can do that, and some people have done that and taken it a lot further, which I'm going to talk about in a bit, but it seems to me, at least, that it's not the more popular way to do it because it takes a lot more math, and who likes math, really? I mean, honestly. So one of the big kind of first initial push for a big unified kind of, this is the new rule set that we're going to use since we really got to have points and whatnot, was something known as the Age of Sigmar SDK. Now, normally, SDK means Software Developers Kit. I'm not sure. Maybe this one means Sigmar Developers Kit. I'm not sure. But it was a website you could go to, and they listed all the different possible units, and they would give you, well, a unit of 10 of these guys cost this many points, and a unit of this cost this many points. And then they had all this information and all that stuff, and a lot of people were using it. They used it for the Adepticon Age of Sigmar tournament this year. If you go and download the Adepticon Age of Sigmar document, the big PDF, the first thing up towards the top is like, okay, go here to the SDK to find all your point values. The thing that's interesting is that when I went and looked at the SDK today, it's shut down. Now, it's all still there, but right on the front page when you come in, it says, hey, we're not going to be updating this anymore because it was a labor of love. I'm sure they weren't getting paid. It was something they were doing in their free time, and the people who were putting this together probably had day jobs and families and all that kind of jazz. But the main thing that they sort of mentioned was that it's very difficult. They were trying to make things so that they were equal and they were level and that the points were fair. And they were finding, specifically with the newer models and a lot of the newer figures and rule sets, the new war scrolls, that you would have a situation where, well, these guys are power X, but if this guy's in the same army, the synergy between them all of a sudden becomes much different, and it's very difficult to quantify. So they basically said, listen, we can't do the quantification anymore. It's too difficult, and we've got other things we'd rather do. And so they're like, here you go. Here's the document. We're not going to update it anymore. Knock yourself out. So one of the biggest ones, being the Age of Sigmar SDK, is no longer being updated. Now, one of the other big ones that I came across in my searches, and I've been hearing about it obviously as well, is something called the South Coast GT. They call it the pool system. I'm not sure why they say pools instead of points. They have this big chart on their website, and you go through and look, oh, look at these guys. Okay, it's clan rats. Well, 10 of them are 3 pools. It seems to me like you could just say points instead of pools, but they always refer to it as pools, and there's probably a reason for it. I didn't look as closely as I probably should have, but anyway, everything is based off of pools. Okay, cool. And they have tons of different, they've got all of the different points, but the thing is that they even made points for things that they aren't going to allow in their tourney. The South Coast GT, Grand Tournament, is a big tournament used to be for fantasy, and now it's for Age of Sigmar, run by the Heel and Hammer podcast. And it's based out of Hampshire, in the UK, the southern coast of the UK, hence the South Coast GT. And people seem to like it. I have to feel that a lot of people seem to like it because, and this is crazy, that I'm going to say this, Games Workshop posted on their Facebook page recently. Okay, right there, that was crazy. But they posted on their Facebook page that they were going to be attending the South Coast GT and that they were going to be live blogging from it. If I would have said like a year ago, Games Workshop mentioned on their Facebook page they were going to an independent tournament and they were going to be live blogging from it, I would have been slapped in the mouth by most people who are in the industry and know what people are talking about, because that's a ridiculous lie to say. But things are changing over at Games Workshop, and they're looking at this big tournament over there in England, and they're like, what these guys are doing, that's good for tournaments, and I think it's good, and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, we're going to show up and live blog, which I didn't even think that's something that they could do over at the GW camp, but there it is. There are a lot of different ways that you can comp and try to do this. In my opinion, none of them are really, truly equal. Just like none of the old points costs were ever really, truly equal. So to go through all of that stuff, to try to get a little bit closer, maybe get a little bit more into your comfort range, and now all things being sort of the same, at least we're sort of on the same page. If that's what you need to do to play a normal game with your friends, I guess, if you and your friends want to do it, that's your fun, and, always make sure you have your own fun, and that's fine. But if you're just getting into the game, and you're thinking, oh, now I've got to figure out what comp system I'm going to use, I'm going to tell you to just don't even think about it until you start thinking about tournaments. If you start thinking about tournaments, obviously you have to look at what system they're going to use. But if you want to play with your friends and you want to have good times and just try things out and maybe be overpowered, maybe be underpowered, maybe have to try to, go against all odds and all that kind of stuff, just use the rules the way that they're written and follow that thing along and do that whole kind of, name that tune like, well, no, that's it. That's my army. And then your opponent's like, well, let's see. I currently have 6 more models than he does. If I can add a couple more things without going over that 1/3, then he won't get in sudden death. And that whole beginning part to playing a game of Age of Sigmar, to me at least, is you're already playing the game by going back and forth and figuring out what your army's going to be. So I'm already enjoying that part right off the bat before we even get to throwing dice. So try that out, get it under your belt, and then you can kind of start to think about it and go, well, maybe I do want to make some changes. Maybe I do want to follow like the South Coast GT rules, or we're going to start using wounds, or whatever it is. But don't just immediately jump from never having played to right into a comp system. Give it some time, play some of the normal games, and as I've been trying to say for a long time, just make sure you have fun with it. It's a game. Have some fun.